I'd like to welcome you very cordially during the earnings conference call for the earnings for the first half of 2018. I'd like to welcome both you present here in this room as well as all those following our webcast. The earnings of the first half of the year as well as of the second quarter will be presented by Mr. Filip Grzegorczyk, the CEO of Tauron Polska Energia, and Mr. Marek Wadowski, the CFO of our group. Following the presentation, a traditional Q&A session will follow, during which we will have also experts present here that I will introduce later. Mr. President, please start. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you very warmly. We have a pleasure to present to you the financial and operating results accomplished by Tauron Group in the first half of 2018 and in Q2 2018 alone. In accordance with the practice so far, to start with, I will present the overall financial situation. I will present the highlights, the key events that occurred during the first half of this year, the implementation of the capital expenditures program, as well as the effects of savings initiatives, efficiency initiatives, and then the results per segment. Financial results will be presented by the CFO, Mr. Wadowski. Ladies and gentlemen, with respect to the key data for the first half of 2018, the results, earnings generated in the first half are good. The financial position of our group is stable. And in the first half of 2018, we posted a 5% increase of sales revenue, which was 9.2 billion PLN, the sales revenue in the first half. The group's EBITDA went up to 2.2 billion PLN, which means that it was higher 2% versus last year. Net profit attributable to the parent company was 567 million PLN, and here it's worth noting that the level of net profit was significantly impacted by a one-off event, namely the booking of a write-down due to impairment of our assets. Capital expenditures of Tauron Group reached 1.5 billion PLN. More than 400 million was allocated to the construction of a 910 megawatt unit at Jaworno power plant, and almost 800 million was allocated to the upgrade of grid assets and new connections in the distribution segment. The net debt to EBITDA ratio is staying at a safe level. At the end of June, it was 2.3. The details on the debt and the financing will be presented further on in the presentation by the CFO, Mr. Wadowski. Moving on to the operating data. First of all, the coal mines owned by Tauron Group produced 2.5 million tons of commercial coal. The volume of the production was affected by the geological and mining conditions and the retooling work on the longwall retooling at the Janina coal mine, whereas the Brzeszcze coal mine generated good results. During the period under review, our coal mines satisfied 50% of the group's demand for coal for generation of electricity and heat. It is also worth noting that the positive impacts were generated by the production trading strategy. Thanks to that, the generation segment posted good financial results, and in spite of a decline of electricity production volume, this positive impact went up by 20%. The next slide presents the financial and operating results achieved in the second quarter of this year, and the trends that were observed during that period were similar to the ones observed for the entire first half of this year. It is worth recalling here that the consolidated net profit was affected by the impairment charges booked that with a total value of 390 million PLN. Next slide presents the key events, the highlights of this year. The majority of those events I had a chance to discussed in May when we were presenting the Q1 earnings. Now I'd like to draw attention only to selected highlights here. In March, we concluded an agreement with the Polish Development Fund defining the terms of engagement in the construction of a 910 megawatt unit at Jaworzno power plant. According to the agreement signed with the Polish Development Fund, the fund will invest up to 880 million PLN in this project. As of today, all the suspending conditions defined in the agreement have been met, except for the decision of the head of the National Administration Revenue approving the electricity sales agreement terms. This condition should be met by the 28th of October 2018. Another initiative that Tauron is promoting and developing along with the Polish Development Fund and the National Center for Research and Development was the setting up of a corporate venture capital fund, the goal of it being developing the ecosystem system of innovative companies, which in long term is to provide support for the growth and expansion of Tauron Group. Let me hand over to the CFO now. First half of 2018, we were dealing with favorable macroeconomic conditions. The increase of GDP was high, was strong. Also, the manufacturing salt production went up, which was reflected in our results in the volume of electricity distributed. The increase of electricity consumption in the first half of 2018 reached 1.9%. In Poland, during that period, less electricity was generated by 1.2%. The change was due mainly, was related to the lignite-generated output, which was related first of all to the shutdown of the outage of the Adamów power plant. With respect to the electricity prices on the market, it's worth noting that the prices, especially in the recent period, went up. The prices went up both for year 2018 as well as for the subsequent periods as well. Contracts, which of course has an impact upon the earnings generated by Tauron Group. Revenue in the first half of 2018 were higher, especially in the electricity supply segment as well as the distribution services. The net result in the first half was lower, which was mainly the result of booked write-downs, impairment charges. The write-down for the mining segment reached net 733 million PLN. At the same time, we reversed the write-down booked in the green electricity area for the total amount of 350 million PLN. The comparable EBITDA, excluding the one-offs related to the dissolving of the ECSW provision and the dissolving of employee benefits related provision in the generation segment, as well as the setting up of provision for the one-off bonuses, is at a similar level as in the first half of 2017. In Q2 alone, the situation of our group is similar: higher revenue, mainly in the electricity supply segment and the distribution services. The net loss generated is the result of impairment charges. Those impairment charges were booked as of the end of June 2018. Adjusted by one-off events in the first half of 2018 is lower by approximately 7 percentage points. With respect to the key segments results, it is worth noting, two elements are worth noting. The first being the largest contribution to the EBITDA generated coming from the distribution segment. This is very important for us. The segment is growing, at the same time it's generating strong contribution to the EBITDA results. The second important element is the difference between EBITDA and EBIT in the mining and generation segments. In the generation segment, EBIT is higher than EBITDA. This is the result of reversing the write-downs, the impairment charges in the green energy area. And in the mining segment, this is the result of write-downs of impairment charges booked. In the Q2 alone this year, the comparison between the two segments, mining and generation, is similar. This is where we reversed the write-downs, the impairment charges, and we booked write-downs in the mining segment. The distribution segment, 77% contribution to the EBITDA generated, which means that our earnings are stable. When you compare EBITDA in the first half, the biggest impact on the changes came from the generation segment and the distribution segment. In the supply segment, we are presenting a negative impact upon EBITDA, which was due, first of all, to the fact that in 2017, the EBITDA in segment supply was higher by the dissolved provision related to the Stalowa Wola combined heat and power plant in the amount of 302 million PLN. In Q2 alone, the distribution and the mining segment had the biggest impact upon EBITDA. Let's move on to the results of individual segments. In the mining segment, the main impact that impacted the earnings generated was the quantity, the volume of coal produced. This volume was lower than the volume produced in 2017. It is worth noting the fact that the first half of 2017 was, in terms of the volume of coal produced, was very favorable for the mining segment. That's why the comparison now shows a strong decline. Apart from that, of course, an important element impacting the volume of coal produced were the problems occurring in the Janina coal mine, much smaller problems in the Sobieski coal mine. The Brzeszcze coal mine at that time increased the coal output. With respect to the coal prices, the situation is favorable. In the first half of 2018, the coal price was higher, and due to the decline of coal volume output, we observed an increase of the unit production cost. The unit production cost is first of all affected by the decline of the volume of coal produced, and the second important element being the increase of costs, especially in terms of costs of purchasing machinery and equipment and the mining services. The second quarter in the mining segment was affected by the same factors and the entire first half of 2018. First of all, the volume of coal produced had a positive impact of the price. However, when you compare to a very good Q2 of last year, you can see, when you compare it, you can see a strong decline of the volume. The generation segment, it's worth noting a one-off event, dissolving of a provision related to the employee benefits. Thanks to the agreement reached with the workforce, we were able to dissolve those provisions. Of course, it's a one-off event, and it will not repeat in the further following quarters of this year. Had it not been for this one-off event, the generation segment would have generated a result that would have been similar level to the one generated last year. In that segment in 2018, we posted a smaller production volume, at the same time higher revenue from the operational capacity reserve mechanism. And with a lower production output, we were able to generate a similar EBITDA as last year. The margin on electricity, its structure is based to a larger extent on the sale of operational capacity reserve service. The cost is a bit higher than last year, but it was due to the fact that the first half of 2018 we settled 1.7 million tons of free of charge carbon credits, which we didn't have. That was in 2017, and we didn't have that in 2018. In Q2 alone, the result, there's no one-off event, because this one-off event that I mentioned before took place at the end of Q1 2018. In Q2 alone, the generation segment result is similar to last year's result. In terms of marginal heat, due to the outdoor temperatures, It is lower. It is lower also due to the fact that last year the heating season ended around the May 20th. This year it took place on April 20th. So as a matter of fact, 1 month of production, of shorter production period. The result of the distribution segment, first of all, the volume of electricity distributed, the volume went up. Apart from the volume, it is worth noting the factor that we call the other. This factor called other includes, first of all, the fixed costs, lower fixed costs. A major, significant portion of those costs will also have an impact upon the entire 2018 due to the fact that it's a recurring effect. Some of those fixed costs, a much smaller portion, in fact, is the result of a shifting from first half to the second half. In Q2 alone, the distribution segment's result is affected by the same factors. In the other area, we all showing declining fixed costs, with the majority of those fixed costs decline being a recurring effect. From the operational point of view, the distribution segment looks very good in the first half. SAIDI and SAIFI indicators, factors are much below the target values, and we expect that if by the end of the year, until the end of the year, there will be no sudden unpredictable weather-related phenomena or disasters in nature, then this year, for the full year, we should be able to keep the SAIDI and SAIFI indicators at the assumed level. The regulatory asset base is steadfastly climbing, and the time it takes to connect the new consumers is shortened. So in operating terms, the distribution segment has a very good first half. In the supply segment, the most important factor is the dissolving of ECSW-related provision. If you exclude this factor, this one-off event, the main factor impacting the results, the earnings of the segment, is the growing margin pressure. Due to the fact that the electricity prices are going up, the pressure is increasing on the margins that we are generating in the supply of electricity to final consumers. That's why we are showing the negative impact of electricity volume and price. This is due to the lower margin that we are generating. The property rights, in the green property rights, we changed the method of settling starting from January 1st, 2018, from the average to the FIFO method, which with the growing market, with the rising price of property rights, has a positive impact. This impact is visible both in the first half as well as in Q2 alone. Nevertheless, it's not an effect that will be recurring in the subsequent quarters. In Q2 alone, the supply segment remains under the influence of the same factors as I mentioned. Here also you can see the pressure on margins. This pressure on margins was even stronger in Q2 than in Q1, and the favorable impact of the property rights due to the change in the way we make settlements of those property rights. In terms of the financial position of Tauron Group, the financial position is good, stable. At the end of June 2018, we had an option to draw financing for the total amount of 5.4 billion PLN, the net debt ratio of 2.3, 3.5 being our limit according to covenants. And during the first half of this year, we shifted the maturity date of the bonds issue program from November 2020 to 2022, until 2022. Now I would like to hand over again the floor to the CEO. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As you know very well, the biggest capex project of Tauron Group is the construction of a 910 megawatt unit at Jaworzno 3 power plant. This project is more than 70% advanced, and we maintain our opinion that it will be commissioned in Q4 next year. I'm saying this because we see no reasons to think that any delays may happen. In the second important project is the construction of a CCGT unit at Stalowa Wola. The work progress at that project at the end of Q2 was 86%. Ladies and gentlemen, we also launched activities aimed at aligning the generating units to the requirements based on the so-called BAT conclusions. The upgrades, the refurbishments that we are planning will allow us to limit the sulfur, nitrogen, mercury, and chlorine compounds. We'll be able to reduce them. Also, we are implementing the low emission program, which is aimed at reducing the smoke in the Silesia and Dąbrowa conurbation metropolitan area, the project which includes the refurbishment of the heating district network to increase the number of consumers connected. The other major capex projects are in the coal mining segment. First of all, the 800-meter level construction at Janina coal mine and the Grzegorz shaft construction at Sobieski coal mine, and the investment program, the capex program at Brzeszcze coal mine. The capital expenditures of Tauron Group in the first half of 2018 reached almost 1.5 billion PLN. Traditionally, the largest capex is allocated to refurbish the upgrade the network, the grid assets, and connecting new consumers. The total capex in the distribution segment came in at about 800 million PLN. The expenditures in the general segment reached 750 million PLN, and with almost 80% allocated to the construction of Jaworzno free power plant. Ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the efficiency improvement program, here, in taking into account your expectations, we decided to change the way we present the effects of efficiency initiatives, and they will be presented by showing the impact upon EBITDA and CAPEX. Let me also remind you that as part of a strategy in force, we are implementing the third program, efficiency improvement program, and what's most important, the implementation of this program will allow us to increase the group's EBITDA by about 400 million PLN in 2018. This effect is recurring, so will be repeated in the subsequent years. With respect to the effects of the strategic initiative starting from 2017 until the end of the first half of 2018, here one needs to indicate, mention here, starting from 2019, the initiatives will generate about 300 million additional EBITDA, and similar as in case of the efficiency improvement program, it will be a recurring effect in the subsequent years. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all from us as far as the presentation is concerned. I'd like to invite you now to ask questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation. Let us start the Q&A session. Apart from the presidents, members of the management board here, we also have Mr. Dariusz Niemiec with us, the managing director for commerce, for trading, and the financial controller, managing director. We also have an opportunity to ask questions using a form available on the webcast website. So, Mr. Piotr Dzięciołowski, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Piotr Dzięciołowski from Citibank. Two questions. By how much BFG should increase so that your margin doesn't, the G tariff, so that your margin doesn't change? How much the cost of purchasing for the needs of black energy certificates and so on, by how much it went up, and what's the impact on the G tariff? And the second thing, I must admit that I'm a bit confounded by the 400 million of recurring effect of it, which is not increasing by 400 million PLN, despite the fact that the business is neither expanding nor shrinking. So if you could tell me what activities bring those 400 million, if you could mention the main groups of the main initiatives where we can see those 400 million, and which means that we don't, what's the reason that we are not seeing those 400 million, which means that there is pressure on costs that mitigate those savings initiatives. Well, G tariff, okay, let's start with G tariff. The rising electricity prices on the market can be seen are visible to anyone. So therefore, this increase should be the same as the increase of electricity prices on the market. This is the truth. However, of course, now we are conducting the analysis how to improve the situation, how to reduce the impact of what's happening on the market on the cost for the final consumers. But we must say that it's too early to speak about details. Nevertheless, one can say that what is happening on the market is reflected, of course, in our purchase costs. However, partly this increase of purchase prices is mitigated by the fact that a large portion of G tariff is hedged. So I may say very generally, but we will see what will be the G tariff following its approval. This is the first question. The second question, efficiency improvement program. Let's put it this way. What you can see in terms of EBITDA improvement in case of efficiency improvement programs effects is the result of the outcome, the effect in comparison not to EBITDA that we generated in 2017, but this is the effect versus the program, the plan, what would have happened had we not done anything. We are showing, for instance, the rationalizing of employment costs, 407 million PLN. For many years now, we've been conducting voluntary redundancy programs in our group, and those voluntary redundancy programs result in the reduction of employment costs, labor costs. This is the permanent effect, recurring effect. You don't see it directly. We have 3.5 billion EBITDA plus 400, it should be 3.9, and it's not 3.9 billion. However, we have to look at the fact that in terms of costs, other factors outside, for instance, employment, labor cost, situation keeps changing. For instance, in the mining segment, not only in mining segment, we can observe increasing costs of machinery, devices, equipment, and external services, and this has a deteriorating impact on EBITDA. So you don't have this one-to-one effect. Nevertheless, the savings in the form of employment costs, but this is the savings, this really takes place. So one could say the EBITDA would have been much worse had we not done those savings. Thank you very much. Yes, another person, please. Welcome, Paweł Pchalski, BZWBK. I have questions to two segments. The first one is mining segment. I'm looking at your mining in the first half of this year, and I'd like to get some guidance from you whether a similar level of output we should expect in the second half, and whether 2019 is also going to be the year where the coal output will be comparable to the first half of 2018 output. That's the first question. The second question is related to the distribution segment, because I'm looking at your second quarter, and EBIT, operating profit, went up by almost 100 million PLN year over year. So congratulations. However, I must ask whether there were any one-off events behind it, or maybe some revaluations of volumes, because I know that other utilities improved significantly their distribution segments based on such on the back of such one-off events. Let me start with the mining segment. The second half should be a bit better than the first half in terms of output. But reaching the output level, the coal production level of last year will be a major challenge. And I think even if the second half is actually better, Still, the coal output for the entire 2018 will come down to the figure that will be below the 2017 value. What will be happening in the subsequent years? Now, in the mining segment, we are working on the program aimed at increasing productivity, and this program, of course, to a large extent, this program is focused on increasing the volume of coal extracted, but this program is spread over a number of years, and we can see clearly that, as a matter of fact, increasing the coal volume above 7 million tons is more a 2 or 3 year timeline, not 1 year. So the subsequent years will also be under the pressure of what's happening in the mining segment. However, the situation should be a bit better. But let me put it this way, that the first half of this year, or the second half of 2017 also, as a matter of fact, was also difficult in the mining segment. The full year, let's say, starting from the beginning of the second half of 2017 up to the end of the first half of 2018, these 12 months have been very difficult. We expect a slight improvement in the second half of 2018, then still a larger improvement in 2020. Nevertheless, above 7 million tons, it's more the next 2 or 3 years time frame. In the distribution segment, in Q2 alone, first of all, 2 important factors occurred. The first factor that we call it SVR, that includes, first of all, the reduction of fixed costs, with a large portion being recurring. Partly this is the effect of the shift and the grid losses, the cost of grid losses, which are below what we originally assumed. These are the 2 important elements that increased, apart from the volume itself, but you can see which were the reasons for the improvement of the distribution segment. In the entire 2018, this result should be better, will be better than in 2017. However, the subsequent quarters most probably will not be as good as Q2. Our expectation is that the Q3, Q4 EBITDA will be lower, mainly on the back of the grid losses and certain mechanization of fixed costs that were partly, or realization of fixed costs that have been partly shifted so far. Thank you very much. Please. Good afternoon, Robert Ipopema, brokerage house. Coming back to the mining segment, I'm thinking whether this negative EBITDA will stay for longer in this segment in the subsequent years as well, or is there some potential that you will achieve the break-even point, or maybe slightly above positive earnings? And it's also related to the fact of this, another question, strategy of the generation segment and the next year, and the operational capital reserve revenue should be included, so you'll be maximizing margin, not volume here in this segment. Also a question about the volume. What's the plan of shutting down the 120 megawatt units? Will you be shutting them down, or will you be presenting them for the auction in December? Let me answer the first question. Mr. Director Mariusz Niemiec will answer the second question. First question related to the mining segment. Here you can see clearly that both in the first half as well as in the full year 2017, we will not achieve the coal output at a level that one could speak about EBITDA being above zero. In the subsequent years, the situation should be better. Nevertheless, at least over the next 2 years, a positive EBITDA will continue to be a challenge in the mining segment. Things should get better, but I think that not so much better that we could speak about the permanent improvement. Only in the 2 or 3 years' time, when we have implemented the productivity improvement program, we will be able to speak more positively about the future. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. With respect to the second question, we always optimize, first of all, the margins. We can do it based on volume or based on the structure of revenue from operational capital reserve, plus margin on selling a smaller volume. We continue to carry out analysis which lead to our final decision, which has an impact upon, leads to the appropriate strategy adopted for the subsequent year. That's what we've been doing over the last few years, and also for 2019, that's what will be our approach. I will not be speaking about the details of the strategy, namely what will be our position for next year. Definitely, based on our knowledge, it will be an optimum version, especially that there are changes now also in the grid manual, transmission grid manual, so grid code, so the balancing will be done a bit differently next year. So all those data will have to take into account to make a final decision. In terms of 120 megawatt units, well, we've been observing, first of all, those units are under derogations. So these are derogations that specify a certain number of hours following which they should be permanently shut down. But we can see another development, namely a larger number of hours of those units that they are used in the system, but the costs are, marginal costs are higher. Secondly, the TSO is not using them very often. They just do it when they have to. So the natural calendar time frame for the shutdown seems to be a bit longer. But I think the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020 was probably the time frame for the final use of the 120 megawatt units. Let me ask also about the availability of coal from your coal mines. So the fact that you have smaller production from your coal mines, so you produce less electricity, so the coal price is high on the market. So if you have the coal output below expectation in the subsequent quarters from your coal mines, that will have an impact upon your production. Adopting a certain position based on the appropriate strategy for the subsequent year is practically dependent upon the margin that you can generate in that segment. Adopting the appropriate strategy for 2017, we did not take into account this factor. It was clear to us that the smaller sales versus smaller production, we have a better chance of achieving better earnings in that segment. But also we take that into account, of course, when we make the final approval of the strategy. Today we supplemented this missing coal from our domestic suppliers. So by the end of this year, we have our balance of coal hedged, secured. Two more questions. G tariff, will you be applying for an increase in the subsequent year? One of the competitors has announced that they will not be applying for higher electricity prices under the G tariff for the households. And another question, the provisions for the litigations, for the lawsuits with respect to the wind farms related disputes and lawsuits. Have you set up any provisions by the end of Q2? Thank you. In terms of G tariff, of course, we continue analyzing the situation. What are the electricity prices? What's the sales level, supply volume in the G tariff? But it's too early to speak about that because the G tariff has such a schedule that we submit the tariff application in the fall, so in some time. So for now, we think that it's too early to communicate this type of information. As far as issues related to provisions are concerned, we are not setting up provisions. We are showing it under contingent liabilities because we continue maintaining our position. We have legal opinions saying that the likelihood of losing the lawsuits in this respect, I'm talking about PKH-related litigations, is below 50%. So therefore, there's a need to set up provisions. We recognize that as contingent liabilities, but it's not the element, the factor that impacts the earnings, the financial results. That continues to be our position, our opinion. Looking at the individual cases and their resolutions and their rulings, so we don't have any basis for changing this approach. Thank you. Let me answer quickly the question of Mr. Christian Bemora from Beskidzki Dom Maklerski, who is asking about the supply volumes under the G tariff. Yearly, we sell about 10 terawatt-hours to individual customers, including about half of this volume is the regulated G tariff segment. So, any more questions from the audience? If not, so please let me, on behalf of the colleagues that have been working on this project, we will display now the invitation to the series. When I was a kid, I would put a 9-volt battery to my tongue, and I would touch it, my tongue with that. That might have encouraged me to become an utility person, electric utility person. What I find dangerous is a person who says he's not afraid. These are the high voltage devices, so you have to be concerned, you have to have some fear. Original production of Focus TV production, a new series, new show, the electric ones, premiere September 6th. Since you're all interested in the power industry, it could be a good opportunity for your family to encourage them to see and watch how it is done. In fact, in a more popular version. But from my side, from our side, we'd like to thank you for accepting our invitation to today's meeting. Today, we already like to invite you to the earnings conference after Q3 in November. In your daily work, please contact the investor relations team. Thank you very much.